This is Daniel Natal, the New American Magazine. Today we're here with Marla Fernandez Benavides. She's joined the illustrious rank of people, including President Donald Trump, who have been deplatformed by big tech. This has been in the news lately, especially since last week. The Supreme Court of Facebook upheld the banning of Donald Trump. So Marla is a mother and a paralegal, and she's been looking into the legality of what's been going on in America. And we met in the comment section of one of my videos. She asked if she could stop by to share some of her thoughts. So welcome to the show, Marla.
Uh, Well, thank you for having me, Daniel.
Now, if you could you tell us what infraction you were guilty of that caused Facebook and other platforms to kind of shut you down?
Pretty much, I think the infraction is that I was uh, I was having a group. I had a group that grew up to 20,000, and they didn't think that my group was. Um, they thought my group was actually violating some illegal activities.
Mhm.
So that's started before I got banned. They thought that I had to caution the conduct of my group, and I had to monitor it more closely. And
Mhm.
when I asked, "What is the group doing?" they just didn't respond. And the next thing I know, I said something about BLM, and I was banned.
Yeah, well,
So I'm a
I just to when you told me that, that kind of reminded me of there was a TV show on MTV called The Challenge, and it's a top-rated kind of reality TV show, and there was a player on there named Dean Nguyen, and she's from Australia, and so she's a Vietnamese extraction from Australia, and she didn't understand the whole George Floyd thing or why he was being lionized, and that was enough. Just questioning that was enough to get her canceled, and I realized in watching that and seeing how the show's producers were even encouraging people to cyber bully her. I mean, they were putting her name out there. They were really just encouraging like a mob attack. And I realized at that point that actors on reality TV shows are not generally just randomly chosen. That they're there to instruct normal people on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And so, kind of reminded me of Napoleon Bonaparte. He said that the theater is the school of the people, and that's how normal people are supposed to be trained. And it was just really just disgusting and disheartening to me seeing how like the producers were just encouraging people to bully her and holding her up as a negative example. And so I don't know, it just got really kind of crazy. So what were your, if I may ask, what were your study when you were studying as a paralegal, some of the kind of legality of what's going on? Like, did you come to any insights?
Yeah, when I was studying as a paralegal, well, actually, when I was studying as a political science major, I took a constitutional law and one and two, and a lot of things from that class sparked when Facebook censored me, and so I was reading back over my notes on censorship, and we had to advise the president on what happened on certain legal issues. And so one of the issues was on censorship. And I went back through my notes. I got an A, by the way, in my
Oh,
constitutional law.
congratulations. There you go.
So so when Facebook censored me, I was like, I get to look back at my notes and see if I have anything there. Um, so pretty much, I really do think that via the contract, there is a way to sue Facebook, but because of Section 230, I
Mhm.
believe that prevents us normal people from suing Facebook. Do you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? I'm afraid of even pleading it, sending in my pleading into the court, and only to fail. Um,
Yeah.
so I haven't really attempted um, suing Facebook. Although I would like to, um,
Mhm. Well, you
because
saw
I'm
where that got President Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump has like all the legal, best legal minds working for him. And even
yeah,
Donald Trump, like Dan Bongino, just a week and a half ago, I think, had an interview with Donald Trump, and YouTube removed it. So, even the president of the United States is kind of coming up against this cyber censorship. So,
Yep. And what one of the things I was interested in is I wrote my first letter to Facebook was on censorship and freedom of speech, and I said I'm writing this letter not for me per se, but I'm concerned for other users, other American users that may be disabled because of your arbitrary and capricious ways. And he didn't
yeah.
really respond. I've sent him 4 letters and to
Mhm.
no avail. They don't really care.
Well, I mean,
Um,
that's the thing. They're being, protected by a statute that would protect them as a free speech platform, but they're not a free speech platform. They're clearly an edit. They're editing things, which means that they're actually kind of a publication. What it really does is reveal that the platforms are not there as free speech platforms. They're there really as social conditioning. And there was an economic behavioralist named Cass Sunstein, and he was in charge of kind of deplatforming conservatives. The Democratic Party kind of hired him. He's now part of the Biden administration. He wrote a great book called Nudge, where he talks about choice architecture, and he has a recent book out called How Change Happens, where he discusses the concepts of norm entrepreneurs and norm cascading. And he says that Donald Trump was dangerous because he was changing norms. He was allowing people to talk about globalization and the problems therewith. He was talking about illegal immigration, and he was kind of moving the Overton window a little to the right. And they had done studies on this, and they were like, he has to go because he's changing opinions, he's changing minds. And then you realize that that's the true function of social media, is not there to kind of allow people to speak in the public square, but it's there to shape kind of where we're going. And I was wondering if you had any kind of opinion on that, Marla.
well, there is quite concern. When I was doing the research for my case, I did realize that almost everybody on the what's the board, the overreach board that
Mhm,
Facebook has, were people that work for the government.
mhm,
So it doesn't surprise me at all that Cass is going on and talking about behavioral,
mhm,
how social norms are created and how they're used to silence people and put them in check and in their path. Um, but when I'm looking at it, I'm also looking at the case law and Holmes, and I really do think that the government is the one behind the censoring on Facebook, and I really do think that uh, it's heading towards um, a tyranny online and tyranny in America,
mhm.
communism, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
you're Cuban. You go under the name of Cuban Goddess, and a Cuban American, was it Maximo Alvarez, just a couple weeks ago, warned about that, about America swallowing the poison pill of communism. And with that, I'm going to end this segment. And I wanted to thank you for coming by, Marla, and it was a pleasure to meet you and talk to you at last. We're returning with Marla Fernandez Benavides. In our previous segment, we were discussing internet censorship. And one of the antidotes to the authoritarianism that we're seeing unfold now is educating our children about the values of a republic. As a result, lots of families have been resorting to homeschooling. I know I have, by the way. And the John Birch Society has great homeschooling materials as well with the Freedom Project Academy. Marla is homeschooling as well. She's using Usborne books to educate her son. Marla, can you tell us some of your concerns about the modern educational system and as it now stands?
Well, one of my biggest concern is in my state, a couple of years back, they introduced equity, and that was their platform. And I was like, "What is equity? What is equity?" And then Kamala Harris nicely educated me on the definition of equity in her current while she was campaigning. And so I'm really concerned because one, there is no educational malpractice, um, and you can't really sue teachers because of this qualified immunity status that they have. Um,
Hmm.
when my son was born, I said, "There is no way I'm gonna put him in school." So, I've never put my son in school at all.
So
Um,
we're noticing a pattern, right? Like in our previous segment with big tech, how they're immune from kind of lawsuits from average people, and then you're looking at the recent thing, with the global pandemic and how the pharmaceutical companies are immune from lawsuits. And then you just mentioned that the teachers, for their malfeasance and poor performance and kind of educational, crimes of the educators, as Alex Newman would say, they're immune from getting sued. So that's a good point. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
and another thing that's also when my state ran through ran did I say that right? Rammed
Yeah.
through the education bill after they got an overwhelming amount of parents testifying against that bill. I said, you know what, this is like blatant disregard for us parents, and the education of our children and what is in the best interest of our children.
Mhm.
So I like there is no way from here on out that my son is ever going to set foot in a school in Denver,
Yeah.
Colorado.
No, like we were talking about in the previous segment, where social media platforms are pretending to be free speech platforms, but they're not. They're kind of social engineering. They're controlling people, telling them what norms are right or wrong, and they're using the schools in much the same way to social engineer. And when you look at the history of it, like I said before, I narrated Alex Newman's "Crimes of the Educators," his book, and all these behavioral psychologists were at the forefront of reshaping the American educational system, like Edward Thorndike, who said, we shouldn't educate children, we should train them like animals. And you see that with all the kids with trigger words. They hear the word racist, and like an animal, it's a cue, a neuro-linguistic programming word. They fall into a trance, their minds shut off. There's certain phrases that they're conditioned with, like a horse that's trained to count by tapping its feet on the ground. And so
Mhm.
that's as a parent, that's why I kind of chose to homeschool just like you, because I didn't want my kids. I wanted my kids to be educated. I didn't want them to be conditioned and trained. Other behavioral psychologists, as an example, that were there with Thorndike, Pavlov, Lev Vygotsky, Alexander Luria. I mean, these people have been absolutely fundamental in transforming what our educational system is away from education into kind of social engineering. So,
And and it's been going on for over 100 years.
yeah, yeah,
It's
exactly.
I can't when I read over the NEA, I'm like, where were my parents when this all this was going on in the 1960s and 70s? They came from Cuba in 1961, and
Hmm.
I'm thinking, Mom, why didn't you do something why did you put me in public school knowing that I was leaving private school to a worse off school in the 80s.
Hmm.
Um, so, and when I learned from Usborne Books and More that only 34% of our nation's kids read proficiently in fourth
Hmm.
grade, I tried to track those numbers, and I tracked it for 5 years. And I was surprised because it hadn't changed since
Hmm.
2015. And then last year, Donald Trump, I guess Betsy DeVos, but her department did a study, and she discovered 70% or 80% of all American adults have low level make low level inferences.
Hmm.
Uh, when I discovered that 70-80% of adults can't even read proficiently, I'm thinking, well, this is our school system. The problem is that they're all functionally illiterate. I'm not
Yeah,
the only one who
yeah,
is functionally
me
who
either.
graduated
Well,
illiterate.
they said
You
John Stuart
know?
Mill said that. He said, in considerations of representative government, he said it is in the interest of the tyrant to have a low level of education and a low level of intelligence among the people. So it's very consciously being done, because they were afraid of normal people kind of knowing how history worked, knowing how the economic system worked, because they would rise up. They would realize they were being kind of like preyed upon. And so they very consciously, at the end of the 19th century, decided to create like a Prussian style school system, as you've been studying. Didn't you also, as somebody of Cuban heritage, Your parents, of course, understand the communist system, just like Maximo Alvarez did at the Republican convention, warning about communism. And you also had a cousin, didn't you, who was a kind of scholar who wrote like a particular book. I wonder if you would touch on that.
Yes, so my cousin Salvador Subirá was a revolutionary who was put in jail for 20 years under Castro's communism, and um, and my mom, I all throughout my youth, she would say that under Batista we could all go out and shop, but we could not go out and express our opinions. So my mom was born free, but it sort of like became a slave to to Batista's regime.
Hmm.
So when I was reading through my cousin's book, he mentions in his book on the totalitarian phenomenon and how certain factors needed to be in place in order for a communist takeover. And those four factors are one, the existence of a crisis, which we are seeing here in America. Two,
Hmm.
the appearance of a charismatic leader, which I think Kamala Harris and Trump and Obama was an actual uh, charismatic leader, and the opportunity of a historical situation and a utopian ideal, which is the Great Reset.
Hmm.
And you can analyze the fall of Cuba with these four factors. And so I was reading his book, and my translating skills are okay. So when I was reading it, made I made a mental note of our system of America, what's going on here and what went on over there. And he was saying that he was talking about the Cuban democracy could prove many economic and social successes, but it had a crisis around the 1930s. There existed a part of the Cuban military that accommodated sympathetic yearning for the validity of Fulgencio Batista.
Hmm.
Finally, around September 4th, the military union gave an about face and brought an existing rush to the gateway, and accomplished the consent of many military superiors that believed in the de facto changes instead of democracy. And right there, don't we have like a de facto changes going on right now?
Yeah,
Can you?
exactly. Well, yeah, Montesquieu talks about that. So does John Locke. I think he talks about that. You know, tyranny is the projection of power without legal authority, and we're seeing a lot of that happen right now, especially under the aegis of kind of medical martial law. But anyway, I would like to thank Marla for giving us her time and insights. And it's customary to say something in closing like, "How can people reach you?" But in this case, you said that you had been deplatformed, so maybe it's smoke signals and a Ouija board. I don't know, but how could
Well,
people reach you, Cuban Goddess? Marla Fernandez Benavides, Cuban Goddess.
you
Go.
can reach me at cubangoddessbooklady.com. And you could also reach me through my Usborne Books and More, myubam.com.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Marla.
Thank you.